Welcome back to another episode of Data with Peachey. I think I'm at episode 17, 18. At this point, I should probably just stop giving numbers because I think I missed an episode, maybe a couple back, but that's okay. It doesn't matter. We make up data here as well on Data with Peachey. Now, today is back to our interviewing series. This is data governance, data management, and all things data strategy travels overseas into the UK, actually. So my guest on the show is the wonderful world renowned Sir, because I can do that. I can knight from Ohio, Sir Adrian Smith. Now, Adrian has a prolific career, very much a data strategist. So I'm interested to see where the conversation goes. I mean, obviously, I'll sprinkle some things in related to data governance and data management for sure. But let's go ahead and I'm going to bring Adrian in. He's been having lattes and things in the back green room since we just got here. So, Adrian, how are you, my friend? How's things?
Hello. Do you know, I actually, when you were giving the introduction, I think there is a genuine Sir Adrian Smith.
Really?
And and I've got a feeling he's involved in data somewhere because when I used to do academic work, I'd Google myself to see where I'd got to, and I'd always come up with his pieces rather than anything I've ever written. So yeah, I have a
Hey,
feeling there will maybe a real Sir Adrian Smith somewhere. So we
well,
might end up with a
we will see if
oh,
there's a copyright strike or anything like that that YouTube may actually have. So, welcome to Data with Peachy. Obviously, we love to have good conversations as it relates to data. Obviously, I hinted at your prolific career before. It's very clear that you've had an amazing career in data. So, tell the people who you are, where you come from, what's your journey, and highlight some maybe pivotal moments in your career.
sure, sure. Do you know, I'm actually still outstanding the fact that we can actually talk across the Atlantic. Isn't that
Right?
just amazing?
It's so
I
great. I
feel,
love it.
and that for me is the thing about what excites me still about the world that we live in and the technology and the data that we are currently in. That things have moved so fast from when we couldn't even to have a conversation, which would have had to have been booked. And if we'd had a phone call, it would have been something which wasn't a lag, or heaven forbid, if we did it on the mobile phone to mobile phone, then I'd
Hmm.
have had to remortgage the house. But this, so to be able to do a video call is just like wow. Well, I'm still impressed. I still love it, and
I do too.
I do. I'm really lucky, but I get to speak to people all over the world, and it never ceases to amaze me. So yeah, I mean, here I am. So I've been working in and with data for the last 20 years. I'm not going to give you my elevator pitch because that's not what people really want to hear. If I'm not here for the interview. Um, and the thing actually that always gets me is that people still struggle so much of their data, and it's because people. I think often people can try and overcomplicate it, and they don't really think about what the actual outcome they want to do. There's so much about output. There's so much about building tech stacks. There's so much even bureaucracy that happens, certainly in the data governance world, that just doesn't need to be done. Um, Now, I come off from having lots of leadership roles within data, and I've been fortunate enough to work within some very large corporations and big banking groups. And most recently, actually, I've been starting to specialize more in most startup and scale up environments. And that's actually really exciting me because now you can have the full range of data. So, from the engineering side right through to the eventual analytics and data products. And you can really do that, and you can do it at speed.
Hmm.
And I've been really super impressed with so many companies and so many young people I've spoken with, and older people as well. Let's not be ageist here, who have been doing so much stuff with data and how exciting some of this stuff is. Now, for me, my pivotal moment was what you described it as, was coming into a bank as an analyst, and actually it was the environment and the culture and my managers who, for some reason, things just clicked into my mind, and I went from being an analyst, and I always say I worked with data and I work in data, and I stopped necessarily having just to work with data, and I started now to work in data, because I went from just taking those numbers and trying to push out a report to being something which actually saying, well, actually, there's a data quality issue. What needs to be done?
Hmm.
Okay, where does data get stored? Who can access this data? Where's this data come from? And when you start building these things up, and this was 15, 20 years ago, I didn't even know the name for a lot of this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure anyone did probably 20
No,
years
not
ago. I
back
think
then.
it was such a, it was still in its real infancy of dealing with large scales, and Excel was still limited to, oh, can you remember, Scott? What was Excel before it reached over 1 million rows?
A pain, because if there's a lot of data that we couldn't do over 1 million rows. We had Lotus
It was,
Notes.
it was something like 65,000 rows, wasn't it? It used to be
Yeah.
able to put.
Like, how did we do things before that?
You just put it into more than one sheet.
It was like just more Excel.
But the thing is, I mean, even though Excel can take now, what was it, 1 point something million
Hmm.
records, there is only technically, it can take 1 point something
Oh,
million
it
records.
runs terribly when you do it,
Uh,
but it
there's,
can be done.
yeah, it's just one of those things. It's just, yeah, I've tried before, and you just put one, drag it across,
Uh-huh.
plus one. How far can you go down? Because that's a sort of sad thing that I get involved with.
Well, that's
And then,
we're data people. That's what we do. We have to test the limits of the data repositories that we have.
what is the number it can produce?
Hmm.
And then you realise that actually, no, I've just broken the computer.
There you go. So, you kind of hint on a little bit, and I know that I've talked about it, I know you and I've talked about it a lot, is this concept of, data literacy and more, okay, we get the best tech stack in the world, we get the best this, that, and the other in the world, but there is the critical missing piece about the ability to understand what you're trying to do with data and then tell the story with the data. Do you see, again, I get to kind of be the guy that says, well, here in the US, we don't do well with that. Over in the UK, are there companies that do a pretty good job of like telling that story as it relates to the data?
It's still a struggle.
Okay.
I think most people, data means reports.
Yep.
There's been very few real success stories in my head that have made data. I was writing a piece, and I think I've actually got it publishing on LinkedIn in the next day or so. And I was writing about data products. So companies who are really embedded data in their day-to-day processes, not just the operations,
Mm-hmm.
but the actual data. So companies like Netflix, who it's not the streaming service that have made Netflix such a success. It's their ability to create the recommendation engine. So they're using the data based on the person.
Mm-hmm.
Uber, that's a taxi service. Loads of people offer taxis, but it was their ability to use data and to be able to show just how much a taxi service cost and
Mm-hmm.
where your taxi was.
Yep.
We've all gone into taxis before, and it's been a different price every time for the same journey.
Yep.
They managed to get rid of that. They were using that data. They were using geospatial data to be able to do it. And then I was thinking, in the UK, what example of company that I can think has really done it on a big scale? I'm sure there's lots of companies out there who have done it, but I've just never heard of them. I can't recall. And the biggest one I can recall actually is a supermarket we have here called Tesco.
Mm.
And Tesco released a membership card, a reward card. And they did this. This was back in 1995. So we're going back 30 years. Now, reward cards must have been about for decades, probably even hundreds of years. And it wasn't the reward card that made them successful. This is how successful they were. That every pound spent on the high street, sorry, for every £7 spent on the high street, £1 was spent with Tesco. They were carrying what? Was that 15%? I can't do this.
I was gonna say I do the math in Excel like we talked about before.
Exactly. It's a huge percentage of the spend which is going on to Tesco. And their strength was their ability not just to have this card and to have this reward they could offer. It was their ability to use the data effectively and to embed that data into that process, which made them a huge success because they were now able to go to people. This is before we had the laws in this country and the rest of Europe regarding privacy. But they could look at what your individual spend was and personalize the offer to you. They would know what their customers wanted, and they were able then to utilize that and to spread out into a much larger offering than just what they had, which was a fruit and veg meat supermarket.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't have it before, where we had hypermarkets. We didn't really have Walmart, Kmart kind of operations. Mm-hmm. And I really find it difficult to actually think of another organisation who's done it so well.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's like you see the big corporate, like you hear the Amazons, you hear the Googles, like you hear them like, okay, yeah, they utilize the data to do a thing, although Amazon's really good at it. But it's nice to see that there are companies like that, you know, agnostic of the location of the world, that are have the ability to really utilize the power of data to do a thing. And I think this ties in nicely into a concept that you and I've talked about before, at least via LinkedIn, the democratization of data. And so fostering a data culture to democratize data is like trying to move the Titanic, because there's a lot of pieces and parts to when we talk about the democratization of data, right? There's the technical bit and bite of democratizing the data. That's one piece. Then there's a whole cultural phenomenon that has to be associated with the business to drive a culture like that, because it's not something that you do very easily. So are there specific actions that you would recommend, like knowing what you know from the supermarket example and the Amazons, the Googles, the Facebooks, like what can companies do, or what can different areas do specifically to kind of make their data more usable and accessible across their org?
I think I think there are perhaps two different things about democratization and actually making the data more accessible. I think there are perhaps two different areas where we could sort of have a look at. I mean, I've always called data democracy as the actual holy grail.
Mm-hmm.
When I've done presentations before, I've often put a cup, which may or may not be the holy grail, or something out from Indiana Jones, because I think that really truly, once you get that, that's when you've almost reached that nirvana point.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that you can start doing your ding, and that'd be cool. It's, and to get to that point now, I think you need to start thinking about your data culture.
Yep.
And that's actually their data literacy. If I create a triangle, a pyramid, a hierarchy of needs, let's not get too academic. I think culture comes below literacy. I think literacy is one of the really most badly abused terms in the data world. Data literacy means it's that enlightenment of organizations who have that freedom to actually use data in their day-to-day operations. Mm-hmm. Most don't. Most still either work on a hunch, or they work on reports which they kind of fiddle around to get somewhere. The actual real true literacy is being able to get that data. This is where it comes down to the democratization as well, is the ability to get that data and to be able to use it in a way that is meaningful for them. And that's tough. That's really tough to get that human-centric view of the data, which makes sense to that person in that department, and that data to be consistent from looking through the prism from somebody else in a different department in the same business, maybe even a different unit of that business.
Yeah,
that's super hard to do. Super hard. I think we're getting nearer and nearer with it, with technology. If we get away from the actual data management side of things, I think things like the semantic web are going to help us a great deal with that. We're able now to start connecting those points up. Mm-hmm. I mean, we're going to have a lot of false positives.
Yeah, in the beginning, that's unfortunately one of the things that's kind of the pain points that you have in the beginning, is you're going to have those false points. You're going to have those, issues with the data, because you're kind of blazing the path to say, this is what it is. This is where we need to go, buy into this. So you're talking about, if we go to the data management governance side, governance is setting the guardrails and foundations to do that. The management of the data, architectural patterns, that type of thing. Okay, we're getting to do that. But then if the culture is not bought in, well, our data is special. We can't do that. Our company data is different. It's special. We can't do that. You miss out on some of the opportunities to have a democratized data set, platform, warehouse, you name it, right? That's probably the number one thing that I've noticed, especially over here in the US, is that is the goal state. That is the nirvana. But it requires so much change management. Sometimes I think businesses are scared because they haven't seen that in the industry.
Yeah. I think change and transformation is so difficult for organizations still to be able to do.
Yeah.
Because it's not just I think we're very siloized. A lot
Mhm.
of things are very siloized, and data is still very much not even data departments going, this is mine. I think this is very much departments going, no, this is mine, and this is mine, and another one going, aha, I've got this, and I'm going to keep this bit. And getting everyone to work together is still really tough.
Mhm.
And that's where you need really good leaders to be able to do that and to get everyone on the same page and actually to be moving in the same direction. So often it feels like herding cats.
Mhm.
It's just not, it's just not a possible thing to be able to do. Well, it is a possible thing to do. You've just got to tell the right stories about why you're doing it. A
Mhm.
great example that was given to me was actually trying to make it personal.
Yeah.
What are you going to get out of it when you try and sell something? Let's not say the organization is going to get X, Y, and Z out of it. What are you going to get out of it
Mhm.
personally? How's it going to help you? Once you start doing that, people really actually start taking it on board, and they want to start actually doing something. I found that's from my past as well. I did a big data governance project, and the only way to actually get the board on board
The word.
was 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 to get so many different stories from different parts and give
Mhm.
everyone as this 15-second little, this is my problem, this is why I want to be able to do
Mhm.
this. Once you start hitting it from enough places, you start getting that executive buy-in. And because the business is actually already saying to you, and you've got it from such a wide area, you want to move now. The board's saying, yeah, let's go for it. People
Mhm.
who are and throughout the organization, you've managed to get enough gathering of minds and collective need to do something that everybody else is saying, yeah, I know this, I respond to this, I understand this.
Yeah.
So let's go for it. Yeah, I think it is. I think it's a big, big, big problem. Change and transformation.
So one of the topics that you and I tend to bounce around in a lot in LinkedIn is this concept of, um, and I think this dovetails nicely into kind of what you just described as a real critical need for a business to drive that cultural change. Is you need someone at the top of the house, a leader. Perhaps we could call them a chief data officer or a head of data, perhaps, where we see these
Oh,
individuals where what I would assume would be that would be a critical skill set to have. But what we're seeing though is not only do they need to be able to do that, but they also should be able to code in 25 different languages and have stood
yeah,
up every single technical tool stack from AWS, Azure, Snowflake, you name it. Are are we as a data industry kind of cutting our nose off to spite our face for all the advances technologically that we're making and then not screaming from the mountaintops about what we just talked about that could be a critical piece to drive a cultural change?
yeah. The problem is, it's by very opening gambit. We're focused on output rather than outcome.
Mm-hmm.
That is what happens time and time again, and that is what's happening in the data world. And I've spoken to numerous companies about coming on board, and it comes quite clear actually they're doing a program where it's data governance or they're replatforming, they're building out this big new tech stack on a cloud platform, or they're wanting to do an AI journey, but there's no rhyme or reason to it.
Mm-hmm.
It's a program, it's a means to an end.
Yep.
And it's a case of, well, actually, why are you doing this?
Mm-hmm.
We come back to my point about why I think so. We get things are far too complex too often.
Yeah.
And I think because we end up doing that as data people, that's why we kind of get diminished as well. Actually, you're not really contributing towards the bigger picture. You're
Mm-hmm.
actually a cost center.
Yep.
Prove to me how you're an actual profit center, because those are the guys who are going to get the pundits. They're the guys who are going to be listened to in the boardroom. They're the guys who are going to be quoted or featured in the company magazine or their LinkedIn page or whatever it's going to be. They're the ones who are going to be going in front of the shareholders and getting the big pat on the back and a nice bonus check at the end of the year. So as data people, we need to get away from that. I think partially away from that technological burden and say, how can we integrate the data into our day-to-day operations to make life easier? Not just easier for everyone, but how can we really add to ROI?
Mm-hmm.
No, I don't want to be full of buzzwords, but we're talking about moving the needle. That's what it should be about.
Yep.
What you're trying to do going to move the needle? Is your data ownership program actually going to make any difference to anyone, or is it actually effectively a lot of work for a lot of people, a lot of meetings, and it's not going to actually make an ounce of difference to anyone's real life?
Mm-hmm.
That's really painful to listen to when you actually think, actually, it doesn't. I've been down that road.
I have too.
I've got
I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah.
my laptop here is rested on my DM book, my Dharma book,
Yep.
and it's a guide. It's not meant to be a to-do list.
And I think again, I will fully admit it. Early in my data governance journey, I was, well, but the framework says you have to have that. It says you
Yeah,
should have it.
yeah,
DCAM,
yeah.
EDM Council. Look, I love that group. Wonderful way to judge your maturity. But are you just trying to get to a number to say that you are a level blah 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 in maturity?
Yeah.
What does that
Yeah.
cost you to get that? What does that get you? And I think
Yeah,
that's
what does it mean?
probably
What does
yeah.
it mean?
Who cares? Like, why do I need to do that?
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
I was the guy early in my career that says, well, hold on a minute. A mature data organization says that you have this. And it's yeah, no, I get it. But I think, and again, I know for sure that I was this guy as a data governance, data management guy but it's the thing by which I can rest on it, because it's really hard to talk about what you're generating from an ROI or value to the business when you don't have an anchor back to it. And I almost wonder, do we as data professionals have an opportunity to go, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to insert common sense into this. Yes, the framework says this, but maybe that doesn't work for our line of business.
Yes.
And
Completely.
that's okay. But
Yes.
that's a really scary proposition, because for years we're told those frameworks are like gospel. Gotta have it.
Yeah. This is best practice.
Yeah.
Everyone wants to do best practice.
Right.
What are you not doing best practice? Whoa. Well, no, because I don't need it.
Right.
Huh?
You don't need best practice. What do you mean? But the book says it's yeah, I get it. But
Yeah.
and I think as data professionals, that's probably, I'm starting to see a shift. Folks like you and I starting to kind of go, no, there's governance that we have to have because the regulation says so. Nothing we can do about that. It's just what it is. But take the other things aside. Should we be doing this other stuff? Like, yes, it makes sense to have a robust stewardship. Cool. What are you asking your stewards to do? Do you just need it? Do you need them to fill out definitions and catalogs and quality? We're like, yeah, but why?
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we get stuck at that part.
Yeah, I had it in an organization I went into very recently, and someone was working on their data quality. And I asked them 3 questions. I said, okay, so what value does this actually have?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I don't know, was the response. Okay, that's fine. Okay, so we don't know what value you're changing is. Right, do you know who actually owns this data so we know who we can go to and talk about it? No, I don't know. Okay, right, so we don't know what difference it's going to make, and we don't know who actually owns it, so no one's really asked for it in the first place. Okay, now if we find out how we want to change it, do we know, can we change it? Oh, no, I don't think we can. Right, so we're doing something that no one's asked for, that we don't think has got any value, and we can't do anything about. And that is applicable to so much across the data world.
Yep.
It's, why are you doing this?
Yep.
Before you add something to your stack, can you actually make do without it? I love AWS. Actually, I like Azure as well. So, guys, if
not sponsored, but could be if you ask really nicely.
I'd be I'm more than happy. I'll even know it across my forehead. I've got a whole big area you can use. There's plenty of advertising space available. But S3 is great because it is literally, we call it a bucket because it's what it is. You just chuck stuff into it. That suffices for so many organizations. Mm-hmm. So many. Yeah, I've come into places where they've got multiple NoSQL databases. Now, vendors, you're naughty because often you've got more than one NoSQL database.
Yeah, they do.
So you've actually sold it to people. Azure, you're particularly naughty for this one. And you don't need to have that. Surely just think to yourself, look, I'm already storing it one place. In fact, is it unstructured data anyway?
Yeah.
I would probably tell you it's probably not. And you actually push it down your analysis path, just store it there, push it down your analysis path and push it out. Push it out to your data somewhere, and you can be quite happy. It's just a JSON format. It's not so much of this stuff isn't rocket science.
Yeah. It's just the over engineering of things that we've done is, and I think, and this is a little bit deeper than just the data aspect of it, but it's the human psychology of, yeah, but if I don't do something, I'm not valuable.
Yeah.
And so I think it's a fear-based thing, but I also think that, again, I think data can really set the path for this, is the ability to say, no, I actually want you to tell me when these things don't provide the value that we should. Yeah. But then I need you to say, I'm going to work on a solution that does provide the value. So give ourselves kind of the wings to be able to make a really uncomfortable decision. Like, yeah, the work I'm doing right now, we probably should stop that. We're not spending money in the right places. And that is one of the things that's probably the biggest scary thing for a lot of people in any organization and any different type of arena, whether it's data or anything else. But, obviously being a data podcast, it makes a lot of sense to talk about it from the data side of things. Now, I'm
not sure if it's people who are scared, Scott, or if it's people's ego.
That's fair. That is really, you're right, because nobody wants to have their baby called ugly, right? Nobody wants that.
I just had having a conversation with someone during the week, and she said to me, I don't even know where to start with data. And I said to her, is it because it's just so big you don't know where to go to? And she said, no. I said, is it technical? Is it just, that ability just to start integrating? She said, no, it's everyone you speak with in data starts to make it sound way more complex. Mm-hmm. And because they can't communicate properly, they kind of shut it down. They shut the conversations down. He said, I think people do this just try to make themselves sound clever.
Yeah, I bet you.
And I had to listen to that. And it's just like, wow, that's actually really tough to hear, that people outside of data are saying, actually, I find you guys as too abstract. So I don't even know how you can add value because I don't even know what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm. I hear that more often than I care to admit, is the idea is like, I don't know why you're asking. Like, first of all, I don't even know what it is that you're asking for because you're using terms that I don't understand. And so that does go back into where I think one of the core capabilities of a governance or a management program is data literacy. Like, governance definitely is setting the foundation, sure. But part of that foundation should be, well, getting everybody to talk the same language. How many times do we talk about having the need for a dictionary or a catalog or a common taxonomy so we're all using the same language, but then we don't teach them the language?
I think we've gone now tools which can actually be cleverer than I think we give it credit for. We can now create data marketplaces. I think that's probably the most buzzworthy of the terms of now. We've got data catalogs or dictionaries, and often it depends on who you're talking to, what software they're using, what organization they're with. And it allows us now to say, actually, I don't want to use your data words. I want to use my business words.
Yeah.
And it's, once again, we come back to that prism effect of being able to look for the same thing, but being able to look at it from using it from different angles, looking for the same thing, and be able to come back to the same answers.
Yeah.
So I think we can start doing that, and we've got to really work hard. Now we've got the technology to do it, to make that, so you can actually start making the stories of people making sense. It's like filling in the blanks. I wish I had one of the kids' magazines here, which has these little. It's National Geographic. There we go. National Geographic. That's another sponsor. And
yes, not sponsored, but would be totally willing to do it. I have plenty of wall space.
Yeah. That's coming from Rupert Murdoch, isn't it? So he's got lots of publications. So I'll do all sorts of things. I'm quite happy to sell myself. It's fine. That's the devil coming down now as well. you asked for it.
Hey, hey, whatever.
A slightly more boring version of Bedazzled. If I get it there, if the devil looks like this, yeah, it's being able to have that. So I've forgotten where I'm going now. That's
No,
the
that's all
problem.
right.
I start going off on these tangents, and when I forget what I'm talking about because that's it. National Geographic Kids.
Yeah.
There we are. National Geographic Kids. They have a little puzzles in the back, and one of them is some stories, and you fill in the blank words.
Mhm.
I mean, it always features bodily fluids and body parts, which
Of
when you've
course.
got kids, you
That's
know exactly what it's going to be,
uh-huh.
and you still remember about something swimming up someone something.
Uh-huh.
It,
Oh yeah, I've heard them all.
it's,
I've heard them all with the kids. Yep.
it still brings us much laughter in this household. Uh, but that's what you need to have with the. This is how the stories are going to be played out in companies. Is they're filling in the blanks. They've got the story already. They just now need you to be able to give you them that data in the word they understand to be able to fill in their blank to make that story coherent. Because what's happening at the moment is they've got a blank and they don't know where to where to go to fill in that blank, or if they fill in the blank, they're not sure if that's the right word to be able to use.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're trying to fill it out in Swahili and they're using Frani. They're going to find the French words and they're having to guess what that word is, and it probably looks right, but they're not 100% sure. So they might not even bother using it. So they might go somewhere else,
Yep.
or they'll go, "This is what we think, or we've always done." How
Yep. Oh,
that
I've heard that a lot. Oh.
we've always done it.
Oh, that just hurts my soul every time I hear that. Every two, like, wow, no, it worked before. We don't need to change it. So I guess one of the things that I would say is I'm seeing it a lot in the new generation, new people getting involved in data, which is awesome. I love it. Data is a wonderful arena and profession to be a part of. But I'm starting to see some of the, sins of the past come in to say, well, you're using a lot of language people don't understand, but the book tells me I have to do it this way. My code says this way. Tips and tricks that you would give to people trying to either advance their career from a data perspective or get started in their career from a data perspective. How could they be a key cog in being, leading data driven transformations in their organizations, regardless of the level?
Wow,
That's
that's
a,
really deep, isn't it?
that's a deep question, right?
It is. It is. And I'm sure, like you, Scott, I absolutely love having like graduates and interns
Love it.
coming in. It's just there's nothing better, is there, when they say, "I've learned so much from you."
Oh God, it's the best feeling in the world. It's like, even though they're not your kid, like your child, you're like, okay, I made an impact in their life right now. They may forget me 30 years from now, and that's fine. But in the next 6 months, 12 months, whatever, I've made a tangible impact in their life. It's such a rewarding feeling.
Yeah, yeah. But then, how can they really help on those transformation journeys? I think they're the voices which people would be increasingly be listened to. They're going to be the leaders of tomorrow.
Yep.
And I've had it before where I've had people saying, "Well, we could do this, we could do that," and the organisation, in all fairness, actually didn't want to do it for a good reason. But I think that's them actually speaking up and saying, I think we should have open enough forums and open enough discussions where people are actually able to express their ideas of how things should be
Yep.
without fear of judgment and without fear of repercussions.
Yep.
I think that's the only way we can really truly progress. And that will be younger people coming into data. And I think people wanting to use data who are not data centric people.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that will happen more and more. I think data departments, and I've always wanted it to be, once you get data democratization, I think actually the data department should almost like scale down. It
Agreed.
sort of it changes. It's not a fixed function. It's a bit like having data KPIs.
Mm-hmm.
To me, you can't have fixed KPIs for a data department because if you're looking at deliverables, that means nothing because who knows? I could deliver 100 things one week and nothing the next because that thing I'm trying to deliver at the moment actually is a really complex piece of work.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't make any sense. But you can show it from either the only time you can actually have a KPI which makes sense is perhaps from a data product of how much you were consuming. So no, your data is actually being used. Perhaps your data literacy. Your KPIs really should be showing the difference that you've made, where you've
Mm-hmm.
actually managed to move that needle. We've been working on this program. We've managed to do this number of agile deliverables, and it's starting to show this impact because at the end of the day, we're the analysts, and we should be able to measure things. If we can't measure it, then who can? And I think that's where young people will also be able to start helping, because they'll be coming up, contributing those ideas and saying, this is what we can do. I think we've got a much more open mind, certainly with the AI. I think it's pushing it. It's pushing the boundaries. Whereas, beforehand we needed consultants, or we needed books, we needed frameworks. Now I can just ask questions, and it gives me the ideas, and it's pushing those ideas.
Mm-hmm. I think AI has a chance to be both a blessing and a curse, depending on how it's utilized. Of course, any new thing like this could be, and there's always going to need, well, not always, that's an absolute. In the short term, for God knows how long, AI will always have to have a human in the loop, just because we don't know what we don't know. It moves really, really fast. Like,
it's
goodness,
so fast.
it's so fast. Like, I feel like every time I turn around, there's a new something or other related to AI, or something's happening, and it just can't keep up.
Well, how many adverts? Every time you go onto an app and you get the adverts on the app, and it's like, whoa. It's just like, you can do that now. You can change it. I mean, I send often video messages to people because I find it's a great way of condensing information into a short time, and you get to have that human interaction. I do call it sometimes the chicken shit way of cold calling. Sorry for my language.
Oh no, that's fine. Let it fly.
But I also subtitle the videos. I don't use the actual subtitles. I'll flash it up with particular headings that I want it to come up with, and that's why. And it starts to show me all the other things I can do. I can turn my head into a dragon and start breathing out fire, spinning, doing Python coding that way. It's just incredible where you can go. Actually, I think AI can be a curse to the younger generation as well. And why they can be the voices to help that change and transformation journeys bringing us through. We've got to be careful in that we don't eliminate the foundational skills.
Yep. They can get lazy.
I think that could really be the thing. Look, I'm sure you can write SQL, yeah?
Oh yeah. It's been a while, but it's been a minute, but I can do it.
Yeah. If I asked you to write a SQL statement, you could write a SQL statement. I mean, we might need to Google it, and none of us, let's face it, no one remembers the syntax. We
all go back to some book that we had, like,
I go back to what I've done previously. Oh, I knew how to do it, but that was it, right?
Exactly.
But what I fear is that we're not going to have that next generation. And I've talked before on other podcasts. I think particularly for data engineering, I think that will see a very quick shift. I see products which will be being built, and it's already happening, where we're not really needing much data engineering input now, because we can actually build building the APIs out. We can build it ourselves. I mean, hell, I build my own AWS platform, and I'm trying to do it as a challenge. And I'm actually only trying to use AI bots. I cheated. I had to use a video the other day, but it will become easier and easier and easier to do this. But the problem is we need that human person you were talking about. We're going to have that human to make sure it happens. But that's going to be someone who's more experienced, because they need to troubleshoot. And troubleshooting is harder than making.
Yeah, because you've got to pour over the code, figure out why it broke, line by line by line. Why did they write the code this way? Why did they do this? But if it's written by AI, you don't really know the why, because it's not going to be annotated. No, it's just going to be taken carte blanche.
It's hard enough. I'm sure you've written stuff before and you've gone back over it, and it's just like, why was I doing? Why did I not document it?
Yeah, I can't tell you how many times I've done. I'm like, why would I do that? Like, that was dumb. And then you get 4 or 5 other days later, and you're like, oh, that's why I did the thing. Yeah. But you're right. Yeah. If we lean strictly into that, and by the way, that could be young people, old people, could be anybody. If we lean strictly into do that, because it's not just laziness. Sometimes it is the business is asking to go really fast, and this is the best way I can get my job done, because it can kind of coming back to that fear aspect, right? Sometimes we don't do things the best way because if we've got to go faster, speed to market, fear to lose a job, you name it, whatever it is. But I think as data professionals, sometimes we can push in the clutch and go, look, if you give me a couple more sprints, I'll be able to do this where it's repeatable in the future. give me a little bit of planning in the beginning. It's going to help us in the long run when we get to the end.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a real balancing act because it's the same for, it doesn't always need to be 100% accurate. There's very few things which need to be, missile guidance systems.
Yeah, probably.
Yes. Yeah, surgery. I pretty much hope that's,
yeah.
But my BI report, my Power BI report, which is reporting for something about manufacturing of paper ducts, does that need to be 100%? Nah.
Probably not.
If we produced 1 million that day, or we produce, 1,025,000, I'm sure we can cope with that sort of leeway. Although when I was working in banking, we used to also have close off the balance sheet. If we were £100 million, we were quite happy. But then the financial crash happened, so
I was going to say,
perhaps ignore everything that I said.
Well, I was going to say, but in financial services, depending on the size of the company, the rounding can be much larger than others. And a rounding error is just a rounding error. Like they'll just say, "Yep, we'll accept it." But
no, in fact, I actually had that in a smaller company, in a smaller startup company, actually, because it was being rounded and it wasn't including the pence or the cents. It made a big difference between the reports. Actually, and the confidence in that reflected. So it's a balancing act on two ways. You've got take more time to actually do it, so it is 100%. But as you say as well, having that time to actually wrap it up properly. And I've been down that route before, where it's like, no, next thing, and then it's actually it come back to it, and it is that situation of it only needs to be run monthly. It only needs to be run on a sporadic basis when something's happening. And what I've got in mind was it made a real big financial difference. There was a real monetary thing that was happening here. But because it was only happening on a sporadic basis, there was no real importance given to making it neatly wrapped up with a nice bow, whereas it should have been, because it was such a nuisance every time, and it caused friction, and it caused arguments within the company.
Yep.
And that's once again, data is quite easily the bad guy.
Yeah. Well, they say the old adage is if you torture data enough, it'll tell you what you want, tell you exactly what you want. Or if the statistic of 80% of statistics are made up on the spot, you just make up the 80%. You just change whatever you want. So, as we kind of get to the end of this, I'll ask. One thing I always do is to say, like, what's the last piece of wisdom that you would give out to anybody? It could be data, could be anything related, but also where can they find you on social media? What are you doing? That type of stuff. The floor is yours.
Well, you can find me on LinkedIn for sure. If you look up Adrian Smith on LinkedIn, I post every day, except Sundays.
As I say, he does, and I will link it in the chat, or link it in the description below for sure.
Yep, yeah. At the moment, LinkedIn have changed their algorithm, so every possible hit helps at the moment. I don't know what they've done to their algorithm, but they've fallen out in love with me at the moment, so I'm quite sad.
You're gonna take it. You are coming on like gangbusters, my friend. It's awesome.
I think what's my words of wisdoms to the data world. I've been doing various podcasts. Some of them are actually about employment, some of them about actually data itself. I think my biggest one for all of this is always about keeping an open mind. I was talking to a recent graduate this afternoon, and it was just about adaptability. Things change constantly. Don't assume that something's going to remain the same. And change with it. Embrace that change. It took me a little while to start to embrace the positivity that AI can actually bring. Now that I embrace it, it's made a massive difference to my life, and I wish I'd done it before. But I mean, I'm perhaps a 6-month laggard in respects to how much it was being used. So make sure you do be a bit of a chameleon. Make sure you are capable of changing your spots. Doesn't mean you can't go into depth with something. Yeah, please, by all account, do learn it really well. I mean, I've got my SAS books here, which are still gathering dust, but one day I'm sure SAS will come back and the product everyone wants to do. Yeah, SAS as in SaaS.
Yeah, not the SaaS. Yeah, not software as a service. The old school SaaS. Like I remember those days. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, good.
Yeah, and I think that's where you've got to be. Data is such a wide topic. I don't think there's probably a discipline which is so wide. When I discuss it with people, and I do give my elevator pitch, and I say, I work on data management. So I work on the engineering, the platforming, the modeling, the architecture. That in itself is actually some really huge topics. I mean, really huge. We've gone from looking at the tech stack to actually how data is modeled. That's massive. And how it interacts with the rest of the organization. Then I talk about, I'll do data governance. That's privacy, security, how data accessible it is, the quality of the data. And that's before I've even gone down to the ownership and the actual models which will probably manage that and the stewardship which supports it. And then I work on data analytics. So here I am, I can produce you reports, I can produce dashboards, and I integrate the data which is being built upon those aforementioned management and governance into your day-to-day processes, so it can actually be used and can create a competitive advantage for organizations. And we haven't even touched yet on the actual proper leadership of data. So building out that culture, doing that stakeholder management, which is the communication pieces, the building of the teams. So we've gone from even just looking at the tech to actually being able to use the tech. So we've not started to even talk about writing out in Python, writing out in SQL. It's humongous, and you need to be able to keep your hands in as much of his pies as possible without burning yourself out, which that's hard as probably
absolutely
done. And keeping up with the trends. You know, it's a fashion. You know, we're a fashion industry. I don't believe in hype cycles. I think that's from people who are probably behind the times and are trying to cling on to the old ways. I think it's just you need to have a look and with an open mind and say, yeah, this actually makes sense to me. Talk to people. There's LinkedIn is a fantastic professional community and beyond who can really start to elevate your way of thinking. If you go in with a closed mind, you're going to just find reformation of what you already believe. And social media is a fantastic bubble for keeping you in that and what you believe and creating it, what you already, just confirming what you already believe.
Yeah. The echo chambers are real. The echo chambers on social media are very real.
Echo chambers are. Yeah. Echo chambers are exactly what they are. I mean, you know, we've seen that time and time again. But you can start actually saying, I can do a retrospective on yourself and see, actually, you know, I could have done something different. And wow, that's actually been a really cool way of doing it. So that's I know that's a very long-winded one, and that was way longer, but that's why I think people should try to be. Yeah,
it's perfect. I think it's the best way to be is like a lot of self-reflection. I've looked at a lot, and don't be afraid to reach out. Like full disclosure, like before LinkedIn, Adrian and I didn't know each other literally at all. It was just say, hey, I'm going to send a message, and then that was it. Don't be afraid to reach out. Sometimes they may end up on a podcast together, but the thing is like, I know if I have questions, comments, concerns, I know that there's somebody on the other side of the world that will, you know, either commiserate with me or give me their opinion on whatever that is. Don't be afraid to reach out. So again, keep an open mind. Don't be afraid. So yeah, dude, this was awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day. I know it's later in the evening for you, probably dinner time. Go grab some dinner. Like I'm going to try to grab some lunch where I'm at.
It's not Australia. I mean, I've done that before as well. I've had to do 4 a.m. calls with Australia. That is tough.
That is tough. That is tough. So if you're watching this on YouTube, consider doing all the YouTube things, like, share, subscribe, thumbs up, leave a comment. I will leave everything about Adrian in the description below. If you're watching this on your favorite podcasting or listening to this on your favorite podcasting application, consider doing the podcasting things, 5 stars, yada, yada, yada. You know what to do. This has been another episode of Data with Peachey, and we will see you in the next one.